There's no agency involved. It's just you and the caregiver, and the state pays the caregiver. And independent providers make significantly more than an agency provider would, because the independent provider is basically running their own business, and they create their own hours and so forth. When I tell you Mama Brandy changed my life, she changed my life.
Welcome to the Nick Speaks podcast, where we speak up, speak out, and speak loud for the disabled community. Tune in every Tuesday, and don't forget to subscribe. And now your host, Nicholas Comstock. This episode of Nick Speaks is brought to you by the Columbus Restorative Massage and Wellness Studio. At Columbus Restorative, every session is designed to restore balance to the body and mind. From easing stress and tension to supporting overall wellness, their team provides more than just a massage. It's a complete restorative experience. It's about truly restoring your body and mind so you can show up as your best self every single day, whether you're stressed, sore, or simply need time to reset. Their team knows exactly how to help you feel renewed. And listeners of the Nick Speaks podcast can enjoy 20% off their next visit by booking online and using the code SPEAKUP at checkout. That's SPEAKUP, SPEAKUP. Take time to recharge, renew, and restore with Columbus Restorative Massage and Wellness Studio. Now let's begin today's episode of Nick Speaks.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to this brand new episode of the Nick Speaks podcast, the podcast dedicated to the disabled community, where we speak out, and speak loud about the issues that matter to the disabled the most. I'm your host, Nick Comstock. You guys, I am so glad that you joined me on this Tuesday for another great episode of Nick Speaks. I'm so excited that you're here with me today. This week, you're stuck with me in a great monologue, I think, and I hope that you really enjoyed today's episode. First of all, I have a really big announcement that I had been waiting to announce for, I believe, about a year, and it has just been completed this past week. This past week, my website went live. I am so excited to announce that nickspeaksofficial.com is live and active right now. So you can go over there. You can find where to listen to my podcast. You can find all my other social media platforms, my TikTok, my Instagram, my Facebook. You can request me to come speak in an event. You can also just send me an email to say, hey. So please go check out my website, nickspeaksofficial.com. I want to thank my brother Josh for working hard on this. I know we've been waiting to get it up and running a long time, and it is finally up and running. So make sure you go check out nickspeaksofficial.com today. You'll be glad you did, because starting very soon, I will be uploading pictures and other videos that happen at my speaking engagements that you do not want to miss, which is why you also want to follow me at my Instagram account, which is at Nick Speaks Official. So you do not want to miss an opportunity to do that. So check out the website, check out my Facebook blog. You can go to nickspeaksofficial.com to get all that information and contact me whenever you would like to do so. So excited to have that website finally up and running. All right, you guys, today I want to talk to you. I want to go down memory lane, if you will allow me. Something that I get criticized for a lot in my social media is talking about all of the bad experiences that I've had with my caregivers throughout the years. And as I've stated on this program before, I have been in the caregiving system as a client since 2012. So I've been in it for a long time now. And I've had a lot of bad experiences. And to be honest with you, finding a good caregiver is like finding a good caregiver experience. It's like trying to find a needle in a haystack. But to be honest with you, throughout the years, I have found a few needles in the haystack. And I want to talk about the good caregivers that I've had. And some of them will hopefully be on the program Nick Speaks within the next few weeks and next few months. Um, I remember the very first caregiver I had. It was from an agency called Help at Home, which I affectionately refer to as Hell at Home, because the agency was awful to work with. They probably thought I was awful to work with. Well, feelings neutral. But the absolute doll that I had acquired was just incredible. Her name was Shannon. Back when I first started caregiving, I was only allowed 2 hours in the morning and 2 hours in the evening to get ready for bed. I believe it was 5 days a week, and then at the time, and then later on, increased to 6 days a week. And then if my parents went out of town or something, of course, it was 7 days a week, and their hours were increased when my parents were out of town. But I want to talk to you. I want Shannon to be the first caregiver that I talk to you about. I was really concerned when I was going into caregiving, because I was like, oh my goodness, what if my first caregiver is a beautiful girl and I get an erection in front of her? What am I supposed to do? And so I would go around and talk to nurses that went to church with me and talk to other people that were in the field. And of course, they were like, Nick, just talk about the weather. They just kind of blew it off as they know it's their job and they know that this is what, they're here to do. And of course, moms know how to embarrass you like nobody else. And so when we were in the first agency opening our case with them, my mom was like, my son wants a caregiver who's hot. And of course, the lady is, all of our caregivers will be professional. Little did we know that wouldn't turn out to be true. The caregivers would be professional. It was the office team that wasn't professional. So I remember the first morning that Shannon walked into my room. She was a tall, beautiful, blonde young woman. She was going to school to be a nurse, which is what a lot of caregivers do. They start off as a caregiver and then they leave that to go into nursing. And which is why we have many, many good nurses and not so many caregivers, because a lot of them leave caregiving to go into nursing. And I would encourage you, if you're a good caregiver, please do whatever you can to stay in this field as a caregiver, because we need you. We really do. But anyway, when Shannon walked in, she was a 24-year-old young lady, couple years younger than me, and I was just nervous. So for about the first week or so, my mom did all my brief changes because I didn't want anybody else to change my brief. And I was just feeling nervous, although I had had school teachers do it all my life when I was at school. To have a complete stranger that I didn't know was just weird to me for whatever reason. I don't know why it wasn't as weird when I was having teachers do it. It was just weird to have somebody new who doesn't normally do it. But Shannon and I got along so well. I mean, and I'm going to be honest with you, Shannon is one of those caregivers, one of the very few caregivers that my mom actually ended up liking. And she was my first one. She worked with me for about a year. she knew that I was a foodie and she was a foodie. So during the 2 hours that we were together, especially in the summer, there were times that, we would take a stroll to Shoop's, which I lived by a Shoop's Hamburgers in Northwest Indiana at the time. And I lived right by a Dairy Queen right at the time when I was still in Northwest Indiana. So a lot of times during Shannon and I's time together, we would go to Shoop's or we would go to Dairy Queen or we would go to a park right by the house. And Shannon and I just got along so well. Like, we laughed every day. And this is why I say a caregiver is a friend when there are no friends to be found, because I didn't have a lot of friends around me. And Shannon was a light in my day. She was only there for 2 hours in the morning and 2 hours in the evening. And she was a true light in my day. And she knew that I loved Judge Judy. She really got invested in me. Um, she knew that I loved to watch Christian television. So she would dance, to the Christian television music and, say hallelujah and things like that. And she didn't, my religion or my relationship with God did not bother her. She wanted to know everything about me. She saw what was going on with my family, and her and I would just laugh at things together, and I was able to um confide in her. And one of the things that we had in common is that I'm a twin, and she grew up around twin brothers because she had twin brothers as well. So that was one thing that we were able to connect with. And I was so sad when she left because I knew that it would be a long time before I had another one like Shannon again. And it was, because then I started to go through the needle in the haystack stage where I had to say goodbye to several caregivers because they just weren't working out like I felt they should or my mom felt they should. And I want to talk about another caregiver that I've had, and this is jumping around several years. I had another great caregiver. Her name was Sandy, and she was an older lady. And to be honest with you, I almost let her go because of her age, because she was a bigger woman, and I was really nervous as to whether or not she could take care of me. But as I started to talk with her, she started to tell me about a young man that she used to take care of by the name of Neil. And she used to go on campus with Neil. She used to help him go to school. She used to take him everywhere and do all these things with him. And Sandy and I really ended up connecting in a way that I soon would connect with several other caregivers. Sandy is one that got me interested in buffalo chicken dip, although she did use canned chicken, and I don't like canned chicken because of the aftertaste that it leaves. But she got me turned on to buffalo chicken dip. And Sandy and I she knew again that I was obsessed with Judge Judy. So we would talk about Judge Judy. And at the time, Sandy was helping me with my YouTube series. I would have a series on YouTube, which is still on there. And I called it Smile Through Your Trial. And then I transferred it to the Wheelchair Nick Network. And every Monday, Sandy had to help me with a list of people to send the video links out to. And she would say, and here's the next person you send it to. And we just had a lot of great conversations. The last I heard, Sandy had breast cancer. I don't know if she recovered from it or not. But Sandy, if you're out there listening, I enjoyed working with you thoroughly. And I will never forget the day that Sandy came back to my room, because a lot of times I spent a lot of time with my caregivers back in my bedroom, especially when I was still living with my parents, because they didn't want the caregivers back. They didn't want the caregivers in the living room or, just going through the house, which I completely understand. So I spent a lot of time with my caregivers in my bedroom. Well, when Sandy was going through my house to do a favor for me, my dad called for her attention, and he said, Sandy, you look a lot like my mom, which was my grandma. And I don't really have a relationship with my dad's side of the family, but that's besides the point. My dad said to Sandy, Sandy, you look a lot like my mom. And so he showed her a picture of his mom, my grandma, and Sandy came back to me and said, your dad thinks I look like his mom. I said, really? And she said, yeah. And here's the thing, I don't look like Aunt B. Your dad's mom looks like Aunt B from Andy Griffith. And Sandy did not like that. She was like, oh my goodness, he thinks I look like Aunt B. And Sandy and I just died laughing, and we died laughing about that for weeks. And it was so much fun. And geez, I'm not gonna get through all the caregivers that really have had an impact on me, but I'm gonna highlight 3 or 4 or maybe 5 or 6. I don't know, but Sandy was just one of those. We had a great time. I was able to have real adult conversations with her, and it's one of those things. I said I almost gave up on her and almost asked her not to come back because I was afraid that she couldn't take care of me. But I'm so glad I did. And because we ended up having such a great time together every time. And she ended up being so good to me. And I just loved her so much. And that was my experience with Sandy. I have another caregiver, and I'm just going down lists. I'm just going down a list of names here in my head. I had another caregiver. Her name was Eleanor. And Eleanor, let me tell you, Eleanor was a very unique individual. Eleanor was one of those people, when you met her, she had purple hair. She had purple highlights in her hair. And so I was like, oh, I wonder how my mom was going to handle this, and, and all that type of stuff. And Eleanor, I believe she was either Mexican or Puerto Rican. And I got to be honest with you, I don't know if I liked her at first or if she had to grow on me. But if I liked her at first, I know that we got along great. And I know that she ended up growing on me. And one of the funny stories with her is that Eleanor liked to be an instigator. Like, if she knew I was in a bad mood, she would poke me on purpose in the middle of a brief change. She'd be like, dude, she'd just take her finger and go, dude, and poke me. And one morning I was not talking to her on purpose because I just wasn't in the mood. And she was poking me and kept poking me. And we were in the middle of personal care. And to give you a little insight about how I do my personal care, my caregivers have to roll me over to clean me up for my personal care. So Eleanor was doing that, and she was poking me and doing all kinds of things and making all kinds of noises because I wouldn't talk to her. And finally, I got so mad at her that I said, Ellie, because she told me to call her Ellie for short. I said, Ellie, stop. And I turned around and I elbowed her right in the right in the boob, gave her a boob smack. And I looked at her because I had never done that to anybody. Her and I looked at each other. She looked at me, I looked at her. And I was like, oh shit, what did I just do? And we both started dying laughing. It kind of broke the ice a little bit. And so now we've, referred that to as to the boob smack heard around the world is what Ellie and I refer that to. And we had a lot of fun together. We really did. And we talked about a lot of stuff. She was somebody that I could really, again, confide in. And I want to say this to caregivers. If you're out there listening today, which I hope many of you are, if you are not someone that your client can trust and confide in, if you don't let them open up to you, and if you don't open up to them, if that's not your thing, maybe caregiving is not your thing. If you're just one to go do your job and sign, have them sign the paperwork after you work for 12 or 14 hours, maybe this is not the job for you. Because I've said it many times, but I'll say it many more. Caregiving is so much more than just wiping a butt or giving a bed bath or giving a shower. You're building human connection with a person. And that's what a person with a disability, or maybe they're not really severely disabled, they need help with light housekeeping. But in a lot of cases, those people who just need help with light housekeeping are very lonely too. They don't have any family around them. If they do have family, their family doesn't see them. And so that's why that caregiver client relationship is so important. You say, well, Nick, my agency doesn't do that. My agency uh, doesn't like us to create relationships with our clients because of boundaries. You know what? Fuck boundaries. Okay. And yes, I said it and I'll say it again. Fuck boundaries. Because in my case, and in many cases, boundaries are thrown out the window when a caregiver is wiping down in the nether regions, okay, or having to see me naked for the first time. Uh, you know, that's why it's so hard for me to take, to take my time with dating because I'm just like, hey, let's get into the physical right away. Because with a caregiver, I have to get in the physical right away. They have to see me naked. They have to wipe my butt. And so that's why I'm like, hey, they have to do it and get paid for it, but these guys don't. Let's have fun. You know what I mean? And so it's so important that your client can confide in you, can trust you. And of course, if they tell you anything that they feel like they're going to harm themselves and this is what I'm going to do, and they don't want to be here anymore, then you need to do the next steps to keep yourself and your client safe. But your client should always feel that you are someone that they can confide in, that they can have a shoulder to cry on, that you guys can be there for each other. I tell my caregiver all the time, just like I'm his first priority when it comes to his job, he's my first priority. If he says, hey, Nick, something's wrong with my family, I can't take you to your event today, we either figured that out with another caregiver or I don't go and we go do and what we need to do and make sure his family is okay. So caregivers and clients need that relationship that says, you know what, you got my back, I got yours. And to these agencies who want to be such sticklers on boundaries. You need to realize it's hard to do that when you're asking caregivers to go in and help clients with the most intimate details of their life. To be honest with you, it's been hard for me to establish boundaries my whole life. Hell, I wasn't even alone in the womb. I had a twin brother in there. I got 1 minute alone because I was 1 minute early, and then the next minute I saw a doctor. And I've never been alone since. And so boundaries have been really hard for me to establish. And so I want to encourage caregivers and caregiving agencies help build healthy relationships between your clients and their caregivers. And caregivers, your responsibility as a caregiver is to not only have a healthy, good relationship with your client, but help your client build other healthy, successful relationships so that you are not the only relationship that they have. I believe that is a caregiver's job. And sometimes that's not in a care plan. Okay. A lot of the stuff that you caregivers are going to encounter don't involve what's written in a care plan. But anyway, I want to get back to my other caregivers. With Eleanor, we also had a lot of fun. She would bring in a lot of food, introduce me to something new, and we had a lot of fun with that. And she would introduce me to, like, some popcorn or some burgers that she had. And so I had a lot of fun with her. My next caregiver that I really had a forever relationship with now, her name is Tiffany, and she will hopefully be on the show within the next few weeks. And when she is, buckle up, guys, because we are going to have a lot of fun with Tiffany. Tiffany was just a joy to be with. She was with me, I believe it was for maybe by this time it was 4 hours in the morning and then 4 hours in the evening. I don't know. It might have still been the 2 hour window. I'm not sure. But regardless, Tiffany and I had a lot of fun. And I'm going to be real with you guys. I grew up in a very toxic, negative family atmosphere. So when other people would come around and notice that, they would intentionally try to do whatever they could to make me happy. And Tiffany and I just constantly, I mean, when you're with somebody and you guys just click, you feel like you were supposed to, you feel like you've been separated at birth. Well, that's how Tiffany and I are. And I tell you, I mean, Tiffany and we would just watch TV and laugh and have a good time. I remember I talked about watching Christian television earlier with my caregivers, and I remember watching a montage of TBN founder and president at the time, Jan Crouch. I remember watching a montage of her hairdos. And I don't know why TBN had a montage of her hairdos on these days at this particular time. But I mean, the crazier the hairdos that Jan Crouch had, my caregiver and I just died laughing. And I remember the hairdos got so crazy. Each time it seemed like there were four more colors added. And Tiffany and I were just dying laughing. And my mom would come in there and she'd be like, "What's going on? What's going on?" And, because people, when you're having fun without people and they're not included, they're irritated. I mean, I'm not gonna lie, I've been that way too. If you're having fun without me and I'm not included, I'm irritated. And that's how that's how it was with my family when I was with Tiffany. When we were having fun, when Tiffany and I were having fun, there were some members of my family that were irritated because we were having so much fun, and they just decided to be miserable. I remember my mom is a naturopath. Like, she makes her own pills, makes her own juices, makes her own powders, all that type of stuff. The running joke in our family is that my mom has like a Walgreens in her bedroom. Like, she has a travel size Walgreens in her bedroom. And I remember telling Tiffany that when she first started working with me, I'm like, Tiffany, girl, my mom makes her own pills, makes her own supplements. And she goes, no, she does not. She does not. I don't believe that, Nick. You lying. She's like, you lying. She's from Texas. She's like, you lying. And I was like, I'm not lying, girl. I promise you. Then the next day or two, Tiffany rushes back to my bedroom to get into work for the day. And she says, Nick, you weren't lying. Your mom's in there with her apron on, and she's got all of her capsules open, and she's got all of her powders, and she's putting it in the capsule. I said, I told you, girl. I said, I told you I wasn't lying. I said, my mom makes her own pills and everything, homemade cakes and everything. She still does the homemade capsules. More power to you people that do it. Tiffany and I just had we just had a ball all the time. And I will tell you that Tiffany was my caregiver around the time that the first 50 Shades of Grey movie came out. And I watched the first 50 Shades of Grey movie. I have not seen the other two 50 Shades of Grey, but I watched it with Tiffany when my mother was out of town. So I watched it with Tiffany. She was there spending some extra time with me because my mom was out of town. And so we watched it, and we found this amazing popcorn place. I mentioned popcorn earlier because Eleanor, I think she brought me Garrett's at one point, which is also awesome popcorn. But Tiffany found this awesome popcorn place, like, at the time, around the corner from my house, or I think 20 minutes away. I'm not sure. But it was awesome popcorn. So we sat there and we watched, 50 Shades of Grey. And we just had a lot of fun talking about folk. We really did. And to be honest with you, remember when I said, when I had my first caregiver, Shannon, that the agency that she was through was horrible. Well, same with Tiffany. The agency that she had was horrible. I've had all these great caregivers, but they've come from terrible agencies. And Tiffany, we had so much drama with that one agency. I don't even think they're in existence anymore. That we were just making fun of the people who work there. I mean, because they were worse than politicians. They lied just as much as they did. They'd be like, someone is coming to take care of you, and Tiffany would have to come do it last minute because they had nobody scheduled in the first place. So, Tiffany and I spent a lot of time together, and we just had a lot of fun laughing and making jokes. Oh, and you know what was the funniest thing? So Tiffany and I would watch TV together a lot. And my mom was a real big fan of the Duggars at the time because they were really big in 2014, somewhere around there. And my mom was just, obsessed with the Duggars. And Tiffany and I would often talk, and she would be like, man, there's something not right about those Duggars. And she would imitate She would imitate the mom. I don't remember the mom's name. I think the mom's name is Michelle. She would imitate the mom talking about how, oh, she loves Jim Bob and Jim Bob is just so great. Blah, 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 blah. And then, like a few weeks later, the whole big scandal came out with the Duggar kid and everything that he's done. And, Tiffany and I just kind of sat there and died laughing, not at the situation, but we knew something was not right about the whole Duggar family. And the fact that it came out when Tiffany was working with me and we were able to say, oh my God, we knew something wasn't right with them. It was just crazy. Uh, and then the same week that came out, I remember my mom pulling Tiffany aside and she going, Tiffany, it's just the devil about the Duggars. It's just the devil trying to tear our family apart. And of course Tiffany's like, yeah, and then she would come back to my room and we would talk and, just be like, okay, yeah, that's my mom, supporting the Duggars, type of thing. And another really cool thing about Tiffany was that, and I never told my mom this, but she's going to know now, is that, well, my mom doesn't listen to my podcast, so not really a big deal. But Tiffany was also a pole dancing instructor on the side of her doing caregiving. So that was a fun, unique thing. And we made all kinds of laughter and joke about. We just had fun. The whole point of this episode is caregivers, clients, have fun, and I hate to say this, but what your agency won't know won't hurt them, okay? And I'm not saying be inappropriate with each other. That's not what I'm saying at all. Although I have a totally different view on whether caregivers and clients should date or not in the first place, which I could do a whole new episode on. Trust me, none of my caregivers that I'm with currently, I want to date. So they have nothing to worry about, just in case any of you are listening. But one of the last caregivers that I want to talk about today, I'm spoken about Shannon, Sandy, Eleanor, Tiffany, and one of the last caregivers that's probably had the biggest influence on my life outside of my current caregiver is Mama Brandy. And I hope that she will be on this show very soon. Mama Brandy, I met her here in Ohio several years ago. My family and I moved to Ohio in 2015, and I believe I met her in 2016 or 2017. I'm not sure. But Brandy Gregory, also known as Mama Brandy, to me, is what they call an independent provider. And an independent provider in the state of Ohio means the client, like me, can do the hiring, can do the firing. There's no agency involved. It's just you and the caregiver, and the state pays the caregiver. And independent providers make significantly more than an agency provider would, because the independent provider is basically running their own business and they create their own hours and so forth. When I tell you Mama Brandy changed my life, she changed my life. When Mama Brandy came into my life, I was living with my grandparents at the time. My parents and I were both living with my grandparents. And I was very depressed, very suicidal, very much so in an emotional and mental abusive situation. And Brandy came over and slowly started helping me take control of my life. I was an advocate for myself, but I would only go so far. I wouldn't go against my parents and say, this is what I'm going to do. When Brandy came into my life, my mom was still over my Social Security. I didn't see a dime of my money. Um, I was extremely depressed and suicidal, and Brandy knew that. And it took her maybe a few months or so to convince me to go and get on depression medication. And when I started doing things like that, it did not make my family very happy, particularly my mom. Because my mom knew at this point she was losing her grip on me. And that did not make her happy. When she found out I was on depression medication, my mom was like, well, I need to know what medication you're on. What if you die? Always went to the worst possibility. And there was one point where Brandy and I where I really considered moving in with Brandy full time to be her client. And I didn't do that because I knew what I was really going for. I knew that I was going to want to live on my own, to make my own decisions. And Brandy has always treated me as her son from the very beginning. I remember within the first year of me moving out on my own, I went to Brandy's house and I went swimming for an entire day. And it was just so great. And I don't think my mom and her get along very well because Brandy's going to kill me for this. But I think in a lot of ways, my mom and her are alike. And they want what's best for me. So they're very high strung about it. I'll put it that way, is a nice way of saying it. But if Brandy had not come into my life, I would not be where I am today. And I know that. I would not be if it was not for Brandy Gregory in my life at the times that she was there. I would not be where I am today. I wouldn't. And there's many other caregivers. Well, I shouldn't say many. There's a few other caregivers I could have put in this episode, but I chose these few because these few have made the most impact on me that I can remember. Shannon with her bright, bubbly personality, and Sandy with that cool grandma vibe, and she was a big girl and she loved to eat. She knew where to get the good food. And Eleanor with that hippie, almost bad friend vibe kind of look with the purple hair highlights, that your parents weren't so sure that they wanted you to be around. Um, all the other ones that I mentioned today, Brandy and all the other one, I think that was it. Shannon, Brandy, Tiffany, and Sandy. Those were the main ones that I've mentioned today. And I just wanted to come share with you that all of my caregiving experience, although many of them have been bad, not all of them have been. And I wanted to share these experiences with you because I wanted to encourage caregivers and remind caregivers your job is so much more than just paperwork. It's about building lasting connections and friendships and helping your client get to where they want to be in life and get to be that awesome, independent person that is inside of them, but it hasn't been discovered in them yet because nobody has pushed them hard enough to make them discover that independent person that is dead inside of them and needs to be awakened. So I encourage a lot of you caregivers out there listening, be a Mama Brandy, be a Sandy, be a Tiffany, be a Shannon, be an Eleanor, be a caregiver when there are no friends to be found. Be a friend when there are no friends to be found. Caregiver. Don't worry about the boundaries. Don't do anything to lose your job. You know that's not what I'm saying. But put the boundaries aside and allow yourself to be a human caregiver and show the client that they are more than just a list of rules and a number on a caseload. Because that's what these caregivers that I've mentioned today did for me. They made me realize that I was not just someone on their daily caseload that they went to see. They made me realize that I was their family and they genuinely cared and loved me. And all of you that I mentioned today, I know some of you are still around. I don't know where a couple of you are, but please know that your impact in my life has been everlasting. And I appreciate it more than my words can express. And I love you, Shannon. I love you, Sandy. I love you, Tiffany. I love you, Eleanor. And I love you, Mama Brandy. More than my words can express. Thank you for listening to this monologue today. This is the Nick Speaks podcast, the podcast dedicated to the disabled community, where we speak out, and speak loud about the issues that matter to the disabled the most. I'm your host, Nick Comstock. Thank you for joining me today. And remember, you guys, make sure you visit the new website, nickspeaksofficial.com, for everything Nick Speaks. I will see you next week. Bye-bye.
Thanks for tuning in to the Nick Speaks podcast, where we speak up, speak out, and speak loud for the disabled community. If today's conversation resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and hit that bell so you never miss a new episode. You can find Nick across all platforms by visiting his link tree in the show notes. And please leave a comment to join the conversation. Until next time, keep speaking up, keep speaking out, and keep speaking loud.